You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Welcome back to another episode. With us today is Alyse Bacine. She is a childhood relational trauma and breathwork expert with her company. So excited to have her on. Alyse, thank you for joining us. How are you today?
I am great. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Absolutely. We appreciate you coming on. We always like to ask our guests, tell us about your entrepreneurial journey. What were you doing before and how did that kind of prepare you into what you're doing today?
Yeah. So let's see. I'm in my fifth year of my business right now, which is crazy to say. And what I was doing before is I was a school counselor for just about a decade. So I have a degree in education and a master's degree in counseling psychology. So how did that prepare me? I would say I don't think I would be able to do what I do now had I not done that. I think that really informed everything that I'm doing right now and some of my other experience. My full healing modality that I've created to heal trauma is basically informed from all of my experience working with traumatized children. And then I also started training as a breathwork practitioner at a very young age. I was about 19 when I first discovered breathwork. So I think those two experiences put together is what I do now. And it's funny because I feel like so many people always say, like, oh, I don't want to be in this job. I want to be running my own business. And I'm like, yeah, but that job is good because you're going to be able to take so much from that. I think the people who offer the most value is from all of their knowledge and experience. So I think that piece is so important. I mean, that was a huge part of my journey, but I think I always knew that I had more to offer than being a school counselor. So in late 2019, I really got the strong nudge. I started working with a coach and I immediately realized that it was time to start my business. So I started my business in early 2020, which ended up being the perfect time because March of 2020, I went home from school and I never went back. And I started my business. I did work virtually until the end of 2020. And then January 2021, I went full time in my business. I've been I don't like to use the word lucky. I feel like that's stupid because I did work really hard to create, but I have been able to create a very objectively successful business. So that's really good. But it's obviously is challenging because I had never run a business before. Obviously, I have a background as a school counselor in education. I had no like model for this. So it definitely has evolved and developed. But the cool thing is I've been able to develop my methodology based on just, like I said, all of my knowledge and experience, but also just working with clients and then also just what had worked for me and then what had worked for my clients. So now I've really been able to develop this very solid and what I think is revolutionary methodology to heal trauma very simply and efficiently, specifically childhood relational trauma, which is what I specialize in. And I can talk more about that if you're like, what does that mean? I can tell you. It's been about 5 years now, and we're just continuing to move forward. So here we are. Did I answer the full question?
Absolutely, you did. Congratulations on 5 years of business. I hear
Thank
from a lot of
you.
entrepreneurs. There's something inside of them that says they need to jump, they need to take that next step. You had a gentle nudge and kind of people to look up to and that coach to push you. But eventually, most of us are experts in our field, but never have run a business before. So suddenly we're wearing all these hats. It can feel like there's a lot, there's a burden to it. And then just as you figure things out, you get rock solid in your offer and what you have, and your business is successful. And you're like, I'm doing much better. But it's tough to kind of find that balance between I was fortunate, but I wouldn't call it luck, but it was some luck, but also I worked hard. So yes, we have to give ourselves credit sometimes, but also understand that there's others that support us and kind of lead us down our path. But I'd love for you to go more into what this childhood trauma is about and how it's kind of affecting personal lives and people who are business owners or just higher level. What is it and how is it affecting us?
Yeah. So childhood relational trauma basically just means the decisions and beliefs you created about yourself and the world based on your relationships in early childhood and just based on what was modeled to you and what you witnessed basically between the ages of 0 and 7, sometimes a little bit older than that, but mostly those ages. And the ways that those patterns and beliefs can show up in your life, in your relationships, but also as you grow your business. And a lot of it just being around things that you believe about yourself, what you believe that you're capable of, what you think you're worthy of, and then also being able to heal and reconcile those things that are mostly in your subconscious so that you can create what you want to create. And I think a lot of people think that their problem is something else, but it's really actually this. Like, I will take on any person who wants to tell me they have some kind of problem, and I will tell them why it's about this. So I think this is really the most important work that you can do for somebody that wants to change. And as I've worked with so many women at this point, like hundreds of women, I've just have seen the same consistent patterns over and over again. So I've been able to develop really solid and simple processes to help them acknowledge the source of the wounding and how to move through it in the quickest way possible so that they can create a permanent result. And that's what I feel really passionately about. And I use breath work as a huge piece of what I do because a lot of these things that I'm talking about are in your subconscious, right? You're not going to necessarily be aware of them, especially like a big part of what I do is unraveling your what I call your birth story, which is the circumstances around your birth from conception to 3 months old. Nobody remembers that. So all of that is in your subconscious mind. So I use the breath work that I've created and some other tools to access the subconscious so you can shift the impacts of that as well. So it's a combination of the breath work that I've created and then the trauma clearing tools that I've created to help people move through this stuff and create a permanent result in their life.
That is incredibly fascinating. Do you mind sharing a story about this person who is experiencing this symptom and what they were going through, what they thought they were attributing that to, and what was actually going on through the childhood without getting too specific? Can you share some of those examples of the symptoms that they have when in reality it's because of this?
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so say there's somebody, I'm just going to give like a client example, right? I had a client who was working really hard to start her business. She really wanted to have this business around this thing. I won't say what it is to keep it a little anonymous. She was putting herself out there and putting herself out there and putting herself out there and creating this really amazing offer that objectively a lot of people would want. And it's like crickets. And this is something where it's not just a matter of like, oh, let me refine this or whatever. There's something underneath the surface here. And she just thinks, well, maybe I'm just not supposed to do this. Maybe this just isn't meant for me. And this is actually a very common thing where people will try to do something and then it's like, well, since this isn't working, maybe this just isn't meant for me. And usually, actually, like 100% of the time, that's not the case. It's just a matter of this, right? So, this particular client, she had a very deep wounding around abandonment. She wasn't raised by her parents. They weren't able to raise her. So, she was raised by aunt and uncle or whatever. And of course, they were lovely people. Like, it wasn't like that bad. But she had a huge wounding around abandonment. And when someone has an abandonment wound, it can surface in many different ways, right? It doesn't always have to look the way I'm describing this situation right now, but this is just how it surfaced for her. So, a lot of times when you have an abandonment wound, that will create is just a deep feeling of there is something wrong with me and that I am rejected. It's a huge feeling of rejection. So the idea of ever being rejected again or putting yourself into a situation where you could potentially be rejected would have just been like a huge no for her on like a deep level. The psyche, when it's traumatized, it will do whatever it needs to do to prevent you from being traumatized again. The human psyche is a very powerful thing, including allowing you to forget traumatizing things that have happened. You will just have a complete block around. So, anyway, even though she was like doing all of these things on a deeper energetic level, she was so afraid of rejection that she was actually hiding. So, even though she was doing things, the reason why people weren't coming is because on a deeper level, she was hiding. She was really just not wanting to be seen by anyone. And she would actually do little things to sabotage it, where she would put something out there, but then would never put like a call to action or would never tell people how they could get in touch with her, or those types of things. So it wasn't even just energetic, but it was all coming from this deep fear of rejection, right? Which it took a little bit of time with her because this was a deeper case of trauma and stuff like that. But once we were able to shift it, she was actually the one who said to me, "Oh my God, I haven't been putting calls to action on any of my posts, any of my emails." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So she actually, once we cleared it, she was able to see that and she was able to create a huge shift in her business and people coming to her, reaching out to her, and even in her relationships, right? She started dating again. So usually these things will not only be impacting your business, they might show up there, but they're essentially going to be impacting your entire life. So that was really what was stopping her from being able to bring clients into her business. And I see that all the time. And when we shifted, people start showing up. So these are the deeper things that I think people will need to learn this other strategy, or I need to learn sales or whatever. And not to say that those things are not important, but usually there's some kind of deeper thing, because if all it was is about learning strategy or sales, we'd all be millionaires at this point, because anybody can learn that stuff. It's not that hard. It's just a matter of applying it. And the reason why most people can't apply it is because of these types of things that I'm talking about.
It's really fascinating and crazy to even think about how many business owners out there are going to be suffering from these symptoms, being held back and not even realizing or recognizing the true problem that's kind of creating the issues from this here. And it seems like you've dialed into your audience. Do you specifically and exclusively work with women, or is it a wider range of people that you serve?
So my clients have ended up mostly being women. I do work with some men though. I just work with them privately just because I don't have them in my groups, because it's just a different dynamic. But I do have one male client that I've worked privately with for years. I have had other male clients, but it is mostly women. Not all business owners. A lot of them are business owners or aspiring business owners, and some of them just want personal growth. And just to add on to what you were saying, a lot of people think the problem is something and it's something else, or they might even know what the problem is, but the way they are dealing with it is not working. And what I mean by that is, for example, say somebody's like, "I'm such a people pleaser. I know I need to stop being a people pleaser. Okay, I see that I'm a people pleaser. That's it. I'm not going to be a people pleaser anymore. I'm going to say no. I'm going to tell my mom I'm not coming to her house tonight. I'm going to tell my husband that he has to cook dinner. I'm not being a people pleaser." And then you try to do that, and it just becomes like a complete explosion. It doesn't work. Either you try to do it and you feel horrible, or somebody gets into a fight or creates chaos, or you don't even do it at all because you're too scared. So this is where a lot of the traditional cognitive behavioral therapy and other mindset changes or perspective shifts will fall short, because if you could simply just change that behavior, you would have done it already. It's coming from a much deeper place. And I think that's the place where people might not understand the full scope of what's actually happening here, because in order to really create a permanent change around something like that, we need to access and acknowledge the part of you who is wounded, that you have not acknowledged, that is people pleasing because of that wound. And until that's acknowledged and reconciled, you'll still do the behavior, because when there's a part of you that you haven't acknowledged, even if you change that behavior, it's going to show up somewhere else. So I think that's an important piece to understand too, is that it's not just about like, now I know I'm doing this, so now I'm just not going to do it. That's usually doesn't work.
Now, for those who want to learn more about childhood trauma, are there any additional resources available online, either through yourself or a third party?
Yeah, I actually have a resource that I created. It's called Clear Trauma from Your Business Cheat Sheet. And even if you don't have a business, you'll get a lot out of it. And you can download that either on my website, alysebreeze.com, or you can access it from my Instagram. And that's a really great place to start because I outline the four major types of childhood relational trauma and then how to know which one is showing up for you right now.
I love that. We'll have the links available down in the description and show notes here so everyone can get connected. Now, since you started your business 5 years ago, what has been the most effective marketing strategy? Because it kind of seems like you're this mix of like B2B yet B2C, because you're working with the individual, but a lot of them are business people. How would you go about building relationships, making connections? Are you running ads? What's working for you?
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really done any ads so far. I'm going to. But for me, it's really just been being on and referrals and just developing relationships with people. That's really what it's been. And social media, that's really it. I think when you start to put yourself out there, you just attract the right people. So I think that's been a lot of it. And then people find me through other people or they'll hear someone else talk about me. I would say in the beginning, I got a lot of clients from podcasts. And then also, I would teach in other people's containers. Even my own business coach hired me to teach breathwork in her container. So from that, I got a lot of clients in the beginning and then podcasts and gradually just building my email list through that. And from social media, that's pretty much been it. I am going to start doing some ads here pretty soon. We're in the midst of building out more of a robust email automation system, but in the beginning, it was really just organically.
That's fantastic. I think one, the referral piece is just a testament that you're delivering on your promise, what you offer. And then the fact that just through word of mouth and social media, I think shows that you've really honed in on your audience, your offer, your messaging. You're teaching this to other groups, and it all happened organically. You're building these relationships, teaching about what you know and how it helps people. And suddenly that light bulb clicks and says, "Oh, I think that's something I need." So that's fantastic and very exciting. What are you looking forward to? Kind of sounds like you're ramping up towards something. What are you looking forward to in 2025 here?
Well, I have my certification program. So my methodology is called the Metamorphosis Method. So I do a certification program where I teach people how to implement my methodology with their clients. That's something I just love so much. In that certification, I teach you how to facilitate breath work, how to facilitate energy work, and the trauma clearing tools that I've created. I just want healers, coaches, therapists to be able to help people create permanent change and also be able to hold a really solid container for clients. I think one of the biggest problems I see in the coaching industry is people not being aware of how to hold a clear and clean space for clients because people don't know about projections or triggers and they end up getting triggered by their clients or not being able to separate their own stuff from their clients. And then both people end up re traumatizing each other. And that can very much be avoided if you acquire a skill set of how to hold that space and how to separate yourself and how to not project your stuff on other people. So that's a really big component of my certification is teaching people how to be trauma informed, how to hold a really clean space, and how to implement these tools to get to the origin of why someone does something to create a permanent change. So I always get really excited for that. I have that starting in February of this year. So that's a really big one. And then I have my year-long membership. It's kind of like a mastermind membership, like hybrid. And I'm always just creating new things for that and growing that. Right now I have I do these like mini trainings. Now I'm about to do one about the abandonment wound specifically coming up, not next week, but the week after. So I love doing really fun things like that to hone in on like a very hyper specific topic and give people really powerful tools and processes to create a shift in a short amount of time. So yeah, those things are really fun. And then just continuing to grow. I want to just bring as many people into the certification as possible so people have these tools. And I always say like I'm not doing this so people can replicate what I do. I just want to give you the tools so that you can use them in the way that you're going to use them, in the way that you run your business, in the way that you work with clients, so that you have this really strong foundational skill set so your clients can get the best results.
I love that. A very exciting time. Sounds like you're growing, you're ready to push. You have a lot of these pieces coming together now for a bigger push. But again, you've solidified your offer and how you help people. That's rock solid to then scaling, trying to get to that next level. Now you're doing this robust email campaign. I'm sure be accompanied by many other things. Throughout your 5 years in business, obviously your expertise was your profession, but would you recommend any books, podcast series, any resources for people who love business or marketing that they need to learn that aspect other than their profession?
I'm just laughing because I resisted this so much. And I'm so lucky because my husband, he has been really helping me since the beginning. And more recently this year, he took on a full-time role in my business. So he does all of the building out my entire email automation system. He runs all my back end stuff. He listens to all the podcasts. And he tells me the information. And we went through this time where he kept sending me stuff. He's like, you gotta listen to this. You gotta listen to this. And I'm just like, I can't listen to this. It's so boring to me. I just want him to extract the information and just tell me. But what I will say is that I have learned, especially this year, I really made it my business to just understand some of the basics of running an online business, like how to build your email list, how to create a solid freebie, how to create a solid automation, and also how to create a really solid low ticket offer that goes into your mid and high ticket offers. But that was something I really resisted for a long time. I started working with these business coaches this past year who are very practical, logical, let's create structure, all of this stuff. And they were like, okay, where's this whole thing, Alyse? And I'm like, it's right up here in my head. They're like, you never wrote down your plan. I was like, no, I know it in my head. And they're like, okay, what about your CRM? Where do you have all your clients and what they're doing and what they've done? I'm like, oh, it's in my head also. I could literally rattle it off to you right now, but I have none of this written down. And I literally just did everything off of my intuition and just what I thought was going to work, which I don't recommend, by the way. I'm not saying that was a good idea. It worked for me because that's how I am. But I did get to the point this past year where I was like, okay, this is not sustainable. And if I want to go to the next level, I need to put all of these structures and foundations in place. So having said that, literally, I still think all business stuff is boring. My husband would listen to Donald Miller and Amy Porterfield, and he would give me the nuggets that he learned from those things. But every time I would try to listen to it, no offense to those people, I know they're really smart. I just find it really boring. I am much more interested in listening to things about trauma and different people's experiences with dissociative identity disorder and major childhood trauma and its effects on the brain. That's more what I'm interested in. And it's really hard for me to try to learn something that I'm not that interested in. So I wish I had better, but what I will do a lot of times too is whatever it is that I manage to learn around business, I will just share with my clients too. And even though I'm not necessarily a business coach, my clients that have businesses, I'm just like, okay, here's what I'm learning. Or I know that LinkedIn is really boring, but I actually learned ways you can use it. Cause I also for a long time was LinkedIn is so boring. I have no capacity for that. But this year I also have started to do that whole thing too. So I think for me, it's just a matter of being practical and learning those practical things while not putting myself to sleep in the process. And it is important. It's just unfortunately something that is not that interesting to me. Although I do enjoy creating fun and innovative ways to structure things and to deliver content. One of my favorite things to do is I do all my low ticket trainings, like this abandonment one thing I'm doing. I do it as a Telegram broadcast. So I don't have to show up on video, on Zoom. I do it in there and I just pop in and I give them information and messages. I give them journaling. I give them breath work, all that stuff, all in there, which is so fun because it's I can do it in my own time. They can listen to it in their own time. So it's like stuff like that where I really enjoy creating fun and innovative ways to do things that aren't the way that everybody does them. So that part of business is fun to me. And just looking at it through the lens of what is going to be the most fun for me to do and how is it going to be the most fun for me to deliver this? Because if I'm enjoying it, everyone else will too. So I think that was one of the things I learned. You don't have to do things the way that everyone else did them. Although it is important to learn basic stuff about running a business, that is important. But just because people are getting on a Zoom call or running a webinar doesn't mean that you have to too. There's so many ways that you can do things that aren't necessarily what other people are doing, and you will enjoy a lot more. So that aspect I really do like.
I think you've been able to unlock your unique ability. A lot of business owners struggle. They're too busy working in their business instead of working on their business. You found this clever and creative way. Take yourself out of that equation to scale a little bit better. But I think always early on, we're a bit resistant to trying to build out these systems or the software that's going to help us manage our contacts or the email marketing. We just into it enough just yet, but
And
then we learn later.
you
It does
learn
help.
later. And the thing is, I was telling one of my clients about this when I first started my business or when I first went full time online marketing. And he was like, you need to build out a funnel, all this stuff. And I listened to him and he wasn't wrong, but I just wasn't ready to do that. And it really fell flat because I just wasn't at the point where I had all the programs. I was solid enough in my process and all of that. So it didn't make sense anyway. So it's like you have to do things in the time when you're ready and don't like force yourself to do things just because everyone's like, "Oh, you have to have a funnel." Yeah, you have to have a funnel, but you also have to have like an actual business with real solid offers across the board from low ticket to high ticket to really make it work. And I don't suggest building all of that out just for the funnel because that doesn't work either. It has to happen naturally and then you can be at the point to do it, but I don't recommend just, like, doing that just to do it, and I think that was one of the mistakes I made, and anytime I look back where I made a decision because I thought that's what I was supposed to do instead of just because it felt right, it always fell flat.
Yes, absolutely. And even early on, when I started my wedding DJ business, everything was in my head. It was on a paper calendar. I was going through a binder. That's how I say my clients. I could remember each of my clients in my head. I knew their names and their date. Suddenly, we get to this point where we're growing, we're building too much that I can't keep that information in my head. And I had to put it into a system. But that was after years of experience. I knew what my leads and buyers were interested in, what motivational factors went into it, what they were looking for in the service fulfillment aspect. And all that finally came together. But like you said, it's not until you're ready. Those opportunities will present themselves. And when you get excited about that thought and idea, that's the time to take action and implement it. Otherwise, like you said, it kind of falls flat, like it falls on deaf ears. I heard you, but I wasn't really listening, sort of deal. But yeah, in business, these opportunities present themselves. It's an exciting time. We're trying to reach an end goal, a destination, but the journey along the way, the road trip is a lot of fun too. We just kind of have to take it in stride.
Yeah, for sure. And I always tell people to look at the next step. Don't look at like all of the things that you would have to do eventually because that's just so overwhelming. But just look at the next step in front of you. And if you keep doing that, then it's so much easier to just keep moving forward.
Yes, absolutely. Now, for those of our listeners who are interested in connecting with you, where can they reach out and connect with you?
So you can find me on Instagram at Alyse_breathes or my website, ElyseBreathes.com. I also have a podcast called Reclaiming Consciousness where I teach a lot about childhood relational trauma and how it impacts you. So if you want to learn more, that's a good place to find me as well. And Facebook, LinkedIn.
All all the places to connect. I love it. We will have those links available down in the show notes as well. Elise, we appreciate you coming on to share your offer, your journey, everything you're about, the things you've learned and the things you're excited about. Any last thoughts, words of wisdom you want to share with our audience here before we wrap up?
Yeah, I guess if you continue to come up against the same challenge or problem, it's most likely this thing that I talked about. So download the cheat sheet or reach out to me and we can get to the bottom of it.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. Always great chatting with you. Excited to keep the connection going and to see your growth in the future. Congratulations and thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.